Trickling in. All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Veranda,
Here.
Castroville,
Here.
County of Monterey, Delray Oaks,
Here.
Marina Coast,
Here.
Monterey,
Here.
Pacific Grove,
Here.
Salinas,
Here.
Sand City, here, Seaside.
Here. Okay. With that, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and we'll ask Mayor Carbone to kick us off here. I think I did you last time too, didn't I?
No.
No? Okay,
No,
perfect,
but
perfect.
I'm happy to.
Thank you for it.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item 4 on the agenda is any additions to the agenda.
No additions, but request that item 15 be moved to be right before item 10, action items.
Okay. So we'll look at moving 15 right before action items. Anything else? Anybody? Any questions, comments from the board? All right, I'll take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for approval. All those in favor?
Move approval as
Oh,
revised.
thank you. I guess we need a motion. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That will move on to item 5, approval of agenda. Or motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Then moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That will move on to item 6, introduction of new board members. City of Sand City has an alternate, Marilee Diaz, that we're going to be. Please, yeah, Mayor Carbone.
Yes, and I meant to let Paul know earlier that she was unable to be here, so she's still at work.
Okay, okay.
She sends her that she's happy to be on the board, and we'll get her over here to a couple meetings.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'd hate to miss you for any of the meetings, but it sounds like Marilee would be a good alternate for you. Any discussion on the item? All right, we'll take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion and approval. Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. With that, move on to public comments. This is for an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on today's agenda. So just do a check-in first with folks in the chamber. Anybody here wish to speak on general public comments? All right, not seeing any, so we'll do a check with folks online. You can use the raise hand function, and I see we already have 2 folks, so why don't we go ahead and start with Adam?
Good evening, Monterey One Water Board members. This is Adam Pinteritz on behalf of the Monterey County Association of Realtors, representing over 1,300 real estate professionals serving residents of Monterey County. I'm here to discuss with you in general public comment an item that is very near and dear to my heart personally, but also essential to the entire community. And as you could probably predict, that subject is housing. The reality is that schools are closing or consolidating. Housing is unaffordable for the vast majority of local residents. And the root of this problem comes down to housing supply. The Monterey Peninsula is literally 30 years behind in housing supply construction. This is not some little small fix. This is not something we can accomplish or solve with just a couple years of forecasting. We need decades worth of housing, and we need to be planning for it. And the only way we will ever possibly have enough water to achieve our housing needs and improve our housing affordability locally is with a desal plant. I can understand people's concerns and objections to a privately owned desal plant, but the reality is that local jurisdictions dropped the ball on a joint project over 10 years ago. In the reality that we live in now today, it is impossible to say as a leader that you are in favor of solving the housing problem while also opposing the desalination project. Those are mutually exclusive positions. Because while we support the recycled water project, and that is essential for bringing more homes online as quickly as possible, the reality is that that cannot sustain the housing supply we need for decades to come. And that is what we need in order to address the housing affordability problem. That is what we need to address the schools that are distressed in our area. That is what we need for our cities to have a more reliable tax base, right? Young families create a reliable tax base. The people who have property tax exemptions from decades ago, they're not supporting our local cities. They're not helping us address our local jurisdiction deficits. So please keep this in mind, members of the Monterey One Water Board. We must have a desal plant if we ever want to seriously address the housing problem. Full stop. Thank you.
We will now hear from Jessica Dinacour. Go ahead, Jessica.
Me okay?
We can hear you.
Hello? Okay. My name is Jessica Denicore, and I live at 50 Coral Street in Pacific Grove. I'll start with a bit of background on the letter you should have in front of you regarding the location and cost of the Coral Street Pump Station project. In March of 2024, Monterey One Water provided the City of Pacific Grove staff with its basis of design report, then received direction from the City of Pacific Grove to locate electrical equipment to the golf course site. The report evaluated 5 alternatives, including construction of a new pump station at the lower end of Esplanade Park, alternative number 5. While alternative number 5 was identified as the most cost-effective and comprehensive solution to address aging infrastructure, it was noted as having a low probability of acceptance due primarily to anticipated concerns from neighborhood stakeholders and city decision makers. Given that this alternative offers clear financial and infrastructure advantages, it is concerning that the more expensive golf course location option appears to have been selected without comparable input from the residents most directly affected by that location. I respectfully urge Monterey One Water and the City of Pacific Grove to revisit the decisions made in 2012 and subsequently revised in 2024 regarding the project location. I believe Esplanade Park site warrants renewed and careful consideration, as it may offer a solution that better balances infrastructure needs with cost efficiency. Any concerns previously raised by the City of Pacific Grove or nearby Esplanade residents should be reevaluated with this updated context. If similar concerns can be addressed or mitigated at the currently proposed golf course location, it stands to reason that comparable solutions could be applied at Esplanade Park. This approach may ultimately yield a more comprehensive and cost-effective outcome. In a time where Monterey One Water will be requesting up to an 8% rate increase, why wouldn't a less expensive and more comprehensive solution be reconsidered? It's actually about a half of the cost of the golf course location with more scope. It is unclear why community input influenced site selection decisions in 2012, but appears to carry less weight for a different group of impacted neighbors in 2026. Consistency in how public feedback is considered is really critical to maintaining trust and transparency in decision making. There's more information in the letter, but due to time, I'm not going to go over it. But I do want to thank you for listening, and I do appreciate the recent communication from Mr. Thompson, Director of Engineering at Monterey One Water. Please relook at this project. Thank you.
Alrighty, seeing no other public commenters, we're going to bring it back to the board. Move on to item 8 is consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent? Been moved and seconded. We'll take it out to the public for public comment. Anybody in the public wish to speak on items on the consent? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. With that, we'll move on to committee reports. 9A is Budget Personnel Committee. Is there a motion to approve the draft meeting minutes?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, bring it back to the board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 9B is Recycled Water Committee. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Moved. Second.
And moved and seconded. Take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, bring it back for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And with that, we'll go on to our new item 10, which is closed session conference with real property negotiators regarding the outfall. So with that, open it up for public comment on closed session agenda items. Anybody on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. Anybody in the chamber wish to speak on this item? Okay, we'll pass it over to Adam.
Good evening, board members. Obviously, we're not privy to what happened in closed session, so I eagerly await further reports. That said, as a marina taxpayer, I'm candidly very tired of the wasteful lawsuits in opposition to the desalination plant. I genuinely would like to know how many millions of dollars have gone towards this losing effort. It's time to stop. It's time to move forward. And I'd be willing to bet that if Marina Coast Water District came back to the table with Cal-Am and tried to discuss how they could be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, I bet they could get a piece of the pie. So let's move forward rather than moving backward. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other public comment, we'll go ahead and adjourn. As we transition here, I don't know how long closed session is going to take, but I would just offer, I'm going to try to keep us within a half hour because we have a lot on our agenda tonight. But I also want the board to feel comfortable in knowing that the discussion that we're having is reasonable. So we'll try to control avoiding too lengthy of a conversation, but we'll keep you posted. So, yes, please.
Maybe the conference room be open for folks to wait.
So what we're going to do is we're going to transition over to the conference room just to make it a little bit easier. So that way folks can stay online here in Zoom. You all are more than welcome to stay and here, get up, stretch your legs. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and reconvene and pick up where we left off. So do a report out from closed session?
Yeah, the board's returned from closed session. There's no reportable action. Chair Williamson.
Thank you. And then we'll move into item 10, which is our action items. 10A is to receive fiscal year 24-25 annual comprehensive financial report and popular annual financial report. I'll pass it to staff for presentation.
Good evening, Chair Williamson, members of the Board of Directors. I'm Steve Kerrigan, Senior Director of Administrative Services. And tonight we're here to present to you the ACFR, which is the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, and the PAFR, the Popular Annual Financial Report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. And PAFR is a summary of the ACFR. We have new auditors this year, a company named Vasquez & Company, and they are in year one of a 3-year contract. But before I introduce Vasquez, I'd like to thank Johanna Vargas and Dylan Hopkins and the entire finance department for all their work on this year's audit. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters tonight, Jay Toledo and Roger Martinez from Vasquez & Company. Gentlemen.
Good evening, members of the board. Hopefully you can see me.
We can hear you, not see
Okay,
you.
good. Once again, thank you for the introduction. We have substantially completed the audit of your financial statements for fiscal year 2025. As your auditors, we have required mandatory communications that we need to go over with you. Will I be sharing the screen or will somebody from staff will be sharing? Okay, Let me share
You will
my,
be sharing the screen, right, Chai?
Yep, it's coming on now.
okay, great. If we could put it on, great, thank you. Let's go to the table of contents. Over the next 10 minutes, these are the items that are going to be covering, and it's just a few reminders on the scope and results of the audit. If we go to the next slide. Next slide, please. This is a team effort. The key takeaway from this slide is that we have a multidisciplinary team working on your audit. Everyone that you see here has experience, significant experience, auditing water agencies. We also have a separate concurrent review partner to make sure that we're abiding by the quality standards. We also include an IT team looking into your information technology controls that are necessary for us to be able to place reliance on your system-generated reports. Next slide. This is just a reminder in that we as a firm, as well as individuals as part of the team, we have very strict independence and conflicts guidelines that we need to follow. There are no matters that I need to bring to your attention. We are independent of the district staff and the board. Next slide. So what was the scope of the engagement? It is to render an opinion on your financial statements. And this was done in accordance with government auditing standards for the year ended June 30, 2025. We also perform an audit of compliance, commonly referred to as the single audit, on your federal expenditures. And we're also going to be issuing a standalone audit on the reclamation fund. Next slide. So what are some of the new changes that transpired during the year? Number one being in that there were two new standards that had to be the staff had to implement, and that it was GASB 101 as well as GASB 102. Adjustments were made to your financial statements to properly reflect the implementation of these standards. For fiscal year 2026, the new standards that are going to come into play is GASB 103 that has to deal with the financial reporting model improvements, as well as 104 that deals with the additional disclosure regarding capital assets, and also GASB 105, which has to deal with subsequent events. Next slide. We are, based upon the results of our procedures, we are rendering a clean opinion. This is the formal term is an unmodified opinion on your financial statements. Your report does include an emphasis of matter paragraph that indicates that there were changes made to your beginning balances. Number one, for the implementation of GASB 101, and number two, there is a correction of error that has to deal with your capital assets that was identified during the course of the audit. This does not impact the final opinion that we're giving on your financial statements. Next slide. Now, when we're doing an audit, we're always thinking, if something were to go wrong, where would that occur? And that is how we identify specific audit areas. And what I want to go over here is where we actually have some results that require us to propose audit adjustments that were accepted by staff and are being reflected in the financial statements. Number one, having to deal with capital assets. We identify an adjustment of $12.9 million, of which $10.1 million relates to fiscal year 2024 and prior years. We also identify an adjustment of $11.2 million regarding certain assets that needed to be capitalized. The net effect was actually less than $2 million. However, these were significant adjustments that were identified, proposed, and accepted by staff. There was also an adjustment regarding the depreciation of land. The overall results was a change to beginning net position of $1.5 million. And then when it comes to GASB 101, the adjustment was made in order to properly implement the standard, which reflect which resulted in an increase of 340,000 in compensated absences as of the end of fiscal year 2024, and an increase in compensated absences of 148,000 for fiscal year 2025. GASB 102 did not have a significant impact on your financial statements. Next slide. This is a summary of all of the different adjustments that were identified and that were booked and reflected in your financial statements. Next slide. We do have recommendations for management. What we have listed here are those on the manual, on the financial statement audit in having to deal with your manual processes. We also have IT recommendations for staff. However, those are considered confidential in nature due to the, you never want to leave a roadmap for hackers when it comes to IT recommendations. But the recommendations that we have here, the first four, they have to deal with anytime that you have material adjustments to your financial statements, those are considered to be material weaknesses. And the first two, as I mentioned before, have to deal with your fixed assets. It is also about improving the year-end closing process. We believe that there are certain recommendations we give to staff that will assist with the closing process so that we can present the financial statements to you a lot sooner. We also have a recommendation regarding the preparation of your schedule of federal expenditures, which I will go separately. So let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned to you before, under the compliance audit, there are two different reports we issue. The first one having to deal with your control matters over financial reporting. We are giving in a modified opinion. However, we are pointing out in that there is a material weakness regarding the, once again, related to your capital assets. There were no other matters that are being pointed out in that report. And we did not identify significant non-compliance with laws, regulations, grants, or contracts having an impact on your financial statements. The second report that we issue has to deal with the compliance itself on the federal grants that were tested. So let's go to the next slide. And then on this report, we are issuing a clean opinion and modified opinion on your compliance with the federal programs. However, we do have two findings. One which is considered, which is being reported, and is included in the schedule of question costs. And that one has to do with the financial statements. But the number two, it has to deal with the preparation of your CFA. If we go to the next slide. And primarily what we identify is in that there was approximately $2 million of federal expenditures incurred in 2024 that are being reported in your 2025 CFA. Anytime that happens, it is especially because given the magnitude of the adjustment, that's the reason why we are having a material weakness, and it is also being reported as a single audit finding. The two programs that are listed here, the Water Recycling and Desalination Construction Program, as well as the Water Infrastructure Financing Innovation, were considered to be the major programs. Next slide. Now, this brings me to a few of the reminders and the required communications. And this is where I need to remind you that it is staff that owns the financial statements. Our responsibility as the auditors is to perform procedures and render an opinion on your financial statements. We review the significant accounting policies as they are listed in the notes to the financial statements, and we believe that they are in accordance with the standards. There were no significant or unusual transactions for which there was no authoritative guidance that we need to bring to your attention. The financial statements, once again, they assume that the agency will continue as a going concern. All audit adjustments that were proposed, as they were listed in the schedule that I showed before, they were booked. There were no past audit differences that I need to bring to your attention, and we did not have disagreements with management over accounting or audit issues. Next slide. We're not aware of management having consulted with other accountants over audit or accounting issues. There were no conditions placed on us prior to being retained as your auditors. We did not encounter difficulties in terms of dealing with staff. This was a collaborative effort, and the information was provided to us as requested. I did mention to you about the 2 material weaknesses that we identified. And also, in a financial statement audit, it is not a forensic audit, but we do perform limited procedures, primarily in the forms of inquiries. And if we encounter anything during the course of the audit that raises a concern as a fraud risk, we perform procedures. But in this case, there were no such matters that were identified during the course of the audit or that were brought to our attention requiring specific procedures to be performed. I also need to mention that management signs a representation letter indicating that we were given complete access to all of the records of the organization. Next slide. That brings to a conclusion my presentation. Are there any questions that we can address for you?
Roger, thank you for your presentation. Opening up to the board. Are any questions at this time? All right, I am not seeing any. Why don't we go ahead and open it up to the public? Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Just a reminder for folks on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. All right, seeing none, bring it back to the board. Any last minute comments on this? We're just receiving the presentation today, so no action is needed. All right, thanks again, Roger, and to our team on getting this across the finish line. Appreciate the update.
Good night.
Righty. With that, we'll move on to 10B, consider approval of a second amendment to the outfall capacity negotiation, cooperation, and funding agreement between Monterey One Water and California American Water Company. With that, I'll pass it to Paul for staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Williamson. So we've talked about this a couple times so far. As you know, we have a negotiation, and this is really loud.
Right?
Is it?
Yeah, it wasn't just me.
I'm going to come back here. So we have a negotiation and reimbursement agreement with CalAm since September of 2023 that runs through 2027 at this point. In that agreement, there's a provision that Monterey One Water will submit on behalf of CalAm a coastal development permit to the California Coastal Commission, which is the next item. It does state in the existing agreement that we would be co-applicants. Being that the outfall is our asset and therefore the permit would be ours, I had made the inquiry to CalAm going, could we remove that and maybe clarify some other items pertaining to CalAm's involvement in the permit process? So that is where this item originated. It was just truly wanting to tighten things up a little bit for us moving forward on a permit perspective. CalAm did agree to that, and there was a back and forth with their attorneys and Jim Gilpin in crafting the language that you see before you. We have reviewed it. We think it is consistent with the existing agreement and doesn't put too much of an onus on Monterey One Water. And so the requested action is certainly to move forward with this amendment. Jim, would you like to provide any other input in terms of the specific verbiage?
Well, as Paul mentioned, there are principally 3 changes to the agreement that are proposed. One is to 6.02 to remove the co-applicant language. As part of the removal of that, CalAm had requested amendments to 6.04, which is the commercially reasonable efforts. That's the parties agreeing to cooperate with each other through this process. And they added the language included in yours, which would include an obligation for us to include them in negotiations, et cetera. That's meant to address the situation that they would have been in if they had been a co-applicant. were pursuing this permit on behalf of their project. So they would be involved in the negotiations with Coastal Commission, et cetera. And if the parties don't agree to Coastal Commission's conditions, there won't be a permit. The other request they made was relative to, there's indemnity provisions in the agreement, and if M1W were to get sued, they've asked to add a provision to the extent Cal-Am is not named as a real party in those actions, because they would relate to things in which Cal-Am frankly would probably be an interested party in litigation context, that we would support their efforts to intervene in any of those litigations. And those changes are set forth at the end of section 9.13. All the other terms and conditions of the existing agreement would remain in effect.
All right. Are there any questions from the board? All right. Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. Folks in the chamber, you can step up to the mic. For folks on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. So we'll go ahead and start in the chamber.
Hi, Howard Wilkins from Remy Manley here on behalf of Marina Coast Water District. I raised this at the commission hearing last time, or the Recycled Water Committee meeting. I have concern for the district relating to the language in section 604 that says M1 Water shall include Cal-Am in any negotiations with Coastal Commission staff over the content of any proposed special conditions for the outfall improvements and obtain Cal-Am's consent before agreeing to any such special conditions. The special conditions are under the Coastal Act and the Coastal Commission's regulations, just like mitigation measures under CEQA. The Coastal Act requires, or the Commission's required to comply with CEQA. And so these are like mitigation measures. And under CEQA, specifically the statute, section 21002, a public agency is required to adopt all feasible mitigation measures. And that's regardless of whether the applicant or the party requesting the permit agrees to those measures. So that while you can accept Cal-Am's opinion about whether something is feasible, to allow them to negotiate over it is not something that CEQA or the Coastal Act allow, and certainly not something that you should agree that if there's a feasible mitigation measure that you won't accept it. Because I think as a agency who is responsible for complying with CEQA, you must adopt all feasible mitigation measures. And if Cal-Am won't agree to it, you don't have the ability to say, well, the applicant won't agree to it, so we're not going to adopt it. Now, again, you can look at whether a mitigation measure is feasible and you can make your own determination about that. But to say you won't adopt it, and obviously Cal-Am has the ability to withdraw its application if there's something unreasonable and say, we don't want to move forward with this. And you certainly aren't required to move forward if Cal-Am doesn't want to do that. But this language is really problematic under CEQA and the Coastal Act. So that's all I have on this one.
Good evening, Chair Williamson and board members. DJ Moore, Paul Hastings on behalf of California American Water. As the board is aware, we worked very closely with your staff and council on the items that are before you today, and we very much appreciate staff's efforts and the staff report, as well as responding to all of the questions that were raised at the committee meeting. As you know, the parties executed the negotiation agreement in October of 2023 to establish roles and responsibilities between the parties about the potential use of the outfall for desal brine. Since that agreement was executed, the parties have worked cooperatively in a number of ways to move the process forward, including the updated ROWD application that this board approved submitting to the regional board last summer. The negotiation agreement originally required Cal-Am and M1W to be co-applicants. As Mr. Shudo explained, upon request by staff, we were willing to remove that language from the proposed agreement, understanding that M1W wants to be the sole applicant and we're happy to accommodate that. But it is really important that CalAM still be included in any negotiations with Coastal Commission staff concerning the application and any of the special conditions that may be imposed. Special conditions from the Coastal Commission are not mitigation measures. They're separately governed by the Coastal Act. I've been practicing before the Coastal Commission for over 20 years. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on with staff on the contents of those conditions before they're presented at the public hearing. And it's critical for CalAM to be engaged in those discussions because its ability to comply with those conditions ultimately will, affect both this agency and CalAM. And it's our expectation that M1W is going to require that CalAM be responsible, at least financially, for the majority of those special conditions. So if CalAM cannot agree, then the water supply project might not proceed, and then the outfall modifications might not be needed, as Mr. Gilpin noted. The agreement also confirms that CalAM will support, that M1W will also support CalAM becoming a party in a potential lawsuit if it arises from the Coastal Commission's consideration of the CDP amendment application so that CalAM can help protect its rights. And we, very much support that change as well. And with that, we respectfully request your approval of the amendment, and we're of course here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Anybody else in the chamber wish to speak on this item? All right, we'll check with our folks on Zoom. See Adam's hand up.
Good evening, board members and staff. Thank you for your diligent work on this important issue. The answer is quite simply before you. Approve the amendment, move forward, deliver the water, and give us all hope for more housing and more affordable housing. That's what this boils down to. Make no mistake, this might seem like a little infrastructure issue, but the future of housing in Monterey County really hinges on this. And, those can be affordable housing. Those can be whatever housing is needed most by our jurisdictions. I know that all of our local leaders are paying close attention to the needs of the community, but none of those needs in terms of housing will ever be fully met unless we proceed with this. So with that, I think the answer is quite clear. Thank you for your consideration tonight.
Anybody else on Zoom? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for motion and approval.
I'll motion to approve. I have a question.
It's been moved and seconded, and there's a question on the table.
Thank you. Yeah, my first question is more of an engineering question, and then my second one would be legal. If the modifications, occur onto the project after coastal approval, if another project is to come in, is it at all feasible that there could have to be modifications done to CalAM's project that is already there? Or was there, enough space and ability to operate totally independent of that? Or, is there any possibility of impacting CalAM's project with another project that way?
So our preliminary determination is that we essentially need to line the outfall pipe to protect it from the corrosive effects of the salty brine. And then we need to install the angled diffusers to lift the salty brine up off the seafloor and ensure it gets properly diluted. Our preliminary determination is that if we make these improvements, it will facilitate other projects with desalination brine being able to use it. We will need to do some more engineering analysis to determine if additional improvements may be needed. For example, we have something like 170 ports in the diffuser section of this pipe. We're proposing to put the angled diffusers on about 158 of them. And so there'll be some unused ports. An example of additional improvements might be, for example, adding additional diffuser ports. So we will need to do some more additional engineering analysis after we learn about the other projects that may need to use the outfall pipe before we can answer definitively whether additional modifications will be needed.
That brings me to my legal question then, and that is, if another project comes in and there have to be some modifications to the Cal-Am project, does that take an agreement between M1W and Cal-Am, or does M1W have the ability to order those improvements?
As it currently exists, Direct Church, the outfall channel is ours. I envision the improvement project going forward as an M1W project to its pipeline, and it would continue to be our pipeline, and we would be our pipeline. We could make whatever changes are necessary, I would say, such that it doesn't affect their use of the pipeline that we've committed to at that point in time.
But my question is just to clarify, because I've heard where there'll be some negotiations, between M1W and Cal-Am. But after it's all put in place, my question is, if another project comes in and there has to be a modification done at all, that would be on what Cal-Am is using there, and what has been part of the modifications, we can go ahead then and do that without having to go and get Cal-Am's approval?
That's what we would envision being included in a future agreement to continue to allow us.
Future agreement? I mean, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yes.
It's not in this agreement.
Yeah, because we haven't committed to making any improvements to the outfall channel, nor have we committed to giving Cal-Am any capacity in that outfall channel, and that would be done in a subsequent agreement.
Yeah, so we can talk about that down.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to offer an alternate motion and see if it gets a second. The alternate motion would be to approve the agreement, to approve amendment number 2 to the outfall capacity negotiation agreement, cooperation and funding agreement, but drop the last sentence in section 9.13. And I'll just explain why. That sentence appears to me to, by the provision in this contract, if we approve the sentence, it would preclude the possibility of a future board in a litigation situation where we've been sued over this to make its own independent judgment as to whether or not Cal-Am should be an intervener. I'm not saying that the board would, I'm saying we should leave that decision up to the board based on the circumstances they face, should such litigation arise, rather than precluding their independent judgment by the provision in this contract.
Ask Jim can you help? I'm not hearing it. I would like to ask for clarification though. If you could help describe for the public how you interpret the last sentence and your feedback as it relates to the substitute motion that was presented.
I guess just point of order, there isn't a substitute motion at this point, but I'm happy to address your question.
Not that it's not that it's live, but the fact that there was one presented.
So this provision has been requested by Cal-Am to be added to section 9.13, which includes an indemnity provision for Cal-Am to defend, hold harmless, and indemnify M1W in the event W is sued for essentially any actions taken arising out of this negotiation agreement, i.e. processing permits, and those kinds of actions. And what Cal-Am has requested with respect to this is that to the extent they are not named in one of those actions, that we would support their efforts to intervene as a real party in interest. The logical connection here is that if M1W and Cal-Am were co-applicants and someone brought a suit challenging that CDP application, Cal-Am would be a party to that action. And as Moore indicated, Cal-Am has requested this because they want to protect their interests. Sues over these permits that we are pursuing in connection with Cal Am's project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and as a follow-up, what would be the risk or not of us?
Risk is Cal Am may not agree to your requested amendment to take them out as a co-applicant. The risk relative to including it is it would preclude you from opposing Cal Am's efforts in the future to intervene in an action brought against M1W over this agreement.
Then we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes 9-1. All right, with that, we'll go on to item 10C is consider authorizing the executive officer to submit a coastal development permit amendment application for modifications to the Monterey One water outfall to the California Coastal Commission related to the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. With that, I'll pass it to Matt for staff presentation.
All right. Good evening, board and board members. I'm your Director of Engineering, Matt Thompson. I'm here with a recommendation to move ahead with submitting an application to the California Coastal Commission for improvements to the Monterey One water outfall. The improvements are needed to accommodate brine discharge from the seawater desalination facility that is a major part of California American Water Company's Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. In 2023, this agency entered an outfall negotiation agreement with Cal Am. Since then, Monterey One Water has hired a major engineering firm to design the outfall improvements needed to facilitate the brine discharge. There are three components of the improvements that are most relevant for today's decision. First, the land portion of the outfall pipe must be lined with a plastic sleeve to protect the pipe from the corrosive effects of brine. Second, at the shoreline, our contractor will need to access an existing junction structure so that divers can get inside the ocean portion of the outfall pipe and replace seals on the pipe joints inside the pipe. Third, at the very end of the ocean outfall, about 2 miles offshore, divers will need to access the diffuser section with boats to install multiple new diffusers that are angled upward to better ensure the brine will be properly diluted. The primary state agency that regulates an ocean outfall is the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. In 2025, the Board of Directors approved an application to the Central Coast Water Board for an amendment to the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, commonly called NPDES permit. That permit is now in process and is scheduled to be considered for adoption by the Central Coast Water Board in August this year. Much of the outfall improvements are located within the coastal zone, so the next permit to apply for is an amendment to the original coastal development permit issued by the California Coastal Commission in 1980. Monterey One Water has applied to the Coastal Commission for amendments several times in the past, including for repairs to the outfall when it was damaged after the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, again in 1992 when Marina Coast Water District annexed into Monterey One Water's service area, and again in 1998 for installation of armor rock. The city of Marina and Marina Coast Water District are opposed to Cal Am's Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. The city of Marina has asserted their position that Monterey One Water should submit the application for an amendment to the coastal development permit to them at the city of Marina, since the Coastal Commission certified their local coastal program in 1982. The city of Marina submitted a letter to this effect on March 19th. That letter was included in my written staff report. Cal Am responded to that letter on March 27th. That letter is also included in my written staff report. And then again, we received another letter from the city of Marina just a few hours ago, and that has been amended to my staff report. We've checked and double checked with Coastal Commission staff and our legal counsel. Coastal Commission clearly retains jurisdiction for amendments to this coastal development permit for the ocean outfall. Coastal Commission staff has instructed us to submit the application directly to them. After they receive the application, they will in turn consult with the city of Marina to ensure the amendment will be consistent with Marina's local coastal program. As for the California Environmental Quality Act, submitting an application for a permit amendment is not a project that requires Monterey One Water to make a CEQA determination at this time. In the environmental impact report for the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project certified by the California Public Utilities Commission in 2018, the outfall improvements were specifically called for as a measure to mitigate the impact of the brine discharge. After we submit the application, we anticipate the Coastal Commission staff will refer to that 2018 EIR to support its decision-making process. So our recommendation this evening is for the board to authorize the executive officer to sign and submit an application to the California Coastal Commission for an amendment to the coastal development permit for outfall improvements related to the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. Consistent with the previous agenda item, Monterey One Water is the sole applicant listed in the application. This decision will have no fiscal impact on Monterey One Water. Per the 2023 outfall agreement, Cal Am will be paying the application fee and has been paying for the Monterey One Water staff time to support this. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Will this project also require a permit from the State Lands Commission or a revision to an existing lease?
That's the next permit on the list. We have explored this a little bit with State Lands Commission. It's actually not yet clear whether a change to the lease agreement will be required. So we need to have some more consultation with State Lands Commission staff before we conclude that we have to apply for a change to our existing lease.
What about the United States Army Corps of Engineers?
This project will not result in any discharge of dredge or fill material. So at this point, we don't believe an Army Corps Section 404 permit will be required for these activities.
And what's the state of the current engineering design?
The engineering design for the outfall improvements is split into two separate projects, the onshore portion and the offshore portion. Both of those are currently about 60% complete, trending to be 90% complete within the next few months.
So you think by summer you'll have 90% designs for both?
Question. This is Bob Holden, principal engineer, who's been leading the charge on the design.
Sorry. So the land portion is at 60%. The offshore portion at 30%, with 60% expected within a month or so. But due to right-of-way issues to get the brine from the desal plant to our facility, we're currently in a major redesign of the brine mixing structure to allow that to happen, turn it around, and also the preliminary response about the NPDES permit has resulted in relocation of some sampling locations and other things. So the design, the onshore design is slowed down some. So, but it will be, yeah, be ready in a few months.
So is there a possibility that more provisions, which is what the right word is, provisions coming out of the Civil Coast, would you want to call it control board, could affect the design process further beyond what they've preliminarily told us with respect to the NPDS?
Yeah, so the idea is that the design engineer will only go to 9% until all the permits and all the right of way obtained before they do the final 100% design. Yes, because it could be litigations required or whatever you want to call it.
Thank you.
Questions? All right, this time we'll take it out to the public. For folks on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. Check in folks in the chamber.
Good evening. My name is Skip Spalding, and I am special counsel to the City of Marina. And I want to comment on the jurisdictional issue. The city's position is clear. The city has original jurisdiction of all amendments to permits within the city that cover land within the city of Marina. The commission issued the permit, the original permit for the outfall in 1980 to this body. And at that time, the city of Marina did not have Coastal Act jurisdiction. Their local coastal program had not been approved. But 2 years later, it was. And under Public Resources Code 30600.5, any CDPs or CDP amendments occurring thereafter must go through the city of Marina. Now, we met with Coastal Commission staff and their attorney, and those folks confirmed 3 things to us. Number one, the Coastal Act does not have a provision requiring amendments to permits issued by the Coastal Commission to go to the Coastal Commission. Secondly, they confirmed there is no regulation that covers this. And thirdly, their counsel said that she was unaware of any case that held that the Coastal Commission had jurisdiction. So with that, and I would like to say that we did file a letter earlier today in which we distinguished the cases that Cal-Am had sent in a letter. Not one of them is on point. So the staff report mentions special condition number 6 as support for this going to the commission. But that provision states, quote, any modification to any approved project components within the coastal zone shall require amendment to the permit. What it doesn't say is who it needs to be submitted to. It doesn't say it must go to the Coastal Commission. Rather, the default in the Coastal Act is that it goes to the local coastal agency. Marina is vigilant in defending and protecting its Coastal Act jurisdiction, as many coastal agencies are. It's very important not to let bad precedent develop, and the city is firm in its belief that here, this amendment should go to Marina, at least for the parts that are within Marina. So
Thank you. That's your time. I apologize, but
all right.
Thank you. Anybody else in the chamber wish to speak on this item?
Good evening, board members. Howard Wilkins again on behalf of Marine Coast Water District. I will briefly repeat some of my prior comments that I made to the Recycled Water Committee. The first is that the staff report indicates that this project is part of the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply larger project. And I will note that for the record that the Coastal Commission and CalAM have previously taken a position that this was a separate independent project, and regardless of that, CEQA guideline section 15051 expressly states that when a public agency carries out a project, they're the lead agency. There are no exceptions to that provision. You are the only applicant here, and you are carrying out the project. So under the CEQA guidelines, you are the lead agency. That doesn't mean you can't potentially tier from prior environmental review, but you are the lead agency. The staff report indicates that you're not, at this point in time, committing to the project, and therefore you're not issuing an approval that requires you to comply with CEQA. And as I mentioned at the Recycled Water Committee, you're required to conduct CEQA before your initial approval, not your final approval. And the question is this application an approval? And under the Coastal Act, and I'll cite to you the cases issued by the California Supreme Court in Save Tar v. City of West Hollywood, that to argue it's not would be inconsistent with the CEQA guidelines. The definition of approval under CEQA is the earliest commitment to a project. And also the Guerrero versus City of Los Angeles case at 98 Cal App 5th, 1087. And what I would point out to here in the last little minute I have is under the Coastal Commission's regulations, amendments are treated the same as any original application, and that's in the Coastal Commission Regulation 13164. And then that in turn requires that applications for permits under 13052 of the Coastal Commission's regulations, that in order to accept an application, the Coastal Commission has to require a discretionary permit from one or more of the cities or other agencies. And that permit application would not be accepted unless all such agencies have granted at minimum their preliminary approvals. So you have to issue a preliminary approval here in order for the Coastal Commission to deem your application complete. It also requires that CEQA be completed. And under J, it says evidence of commitment by the local government or other appropriate entity to serve the proposed project. And finally, that you must get a local coastal permit issued by the local agency. I see my time is running out, but I would implore you to look at the Coastal Commission regulations. You are making a commitment to this project, and you must comply with CEQA. Thank you.
Good evening, board, staff, all the agencies represented here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your work on these complex projects, which impact so many people on the peninsula and in our region. I'm Monica Law with the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. We have over 600 members who are deeply impacted by water concerns in our area, not just housing, but development, growth, quality of life. I understand everyone in this room might have different opinions, but is well researched in what they believe. I think people in here have very good intentions of what we want to see our community grow and look like. But having witnessed the work of Monterey One Water, we're here in support of item 10C, supporting the research and the work that's been done, moving forward with the proposal as the executive director has suggested. So we're here in support of 10C. Thank you.
Good evening, DJ Moore again on behalf of CalAM. We do have a presentation that I was hoping could get pulled up. Thank you. Next slide, please. And next slide. Okay, great. I want to start by noting that there is nothing substantively new in this application that this board has not already seen. Last summer, you approved submitting the ROWD application to the regional board with the exact same outfall modifications. Nothing has changed. These are the same modifications, just being sent to a different agency for their independent review. And nothing you do today approves the outfall modifications. As your staff noted, by submitting the application, the board is not agreeing to modify the outfall in any way. This just starts a review process by the Coastal Commission. We've heard from your staff that M1W wants the Coastal Commission's analysis to occur before M1 considers a lease with CalAm or modifications to the outfall. That makes sense. So this application just ensures you'll have both the Coastal Commission and the regional board's expert review before taking an action. Next slide. You all work for public agencies and know how long the review process can take. Regional board has been considering these modifications since October of 2024. So it's very important that the Coastal Commission's review get underway. But an applicant that is just submitting an application is not a project under CEQA because it cannot impact the environment. The application just starts a review process. A CEQA action is only required when an agency approves a project or commits itself to that project. M1W is not approving the modifications, and as your staff will confirm, your action today is in no way a commitment. You are not committing funds. You are not implementing the changes. Those were the issues in the cases that Marina Coast Council cited just a minute ago. That's not at issue here. You will need to consider CEQA when you consider authorizing the outfall improvements in the future, but that day is not today. Next slide, please. As detailed in the staff report, the Coastal Commission is the appropriate body to review this application. Marina has not provided any case where a court has found otherwise. The 1980 CDP includes a condition that requires any modifications be considered through an amendment to the commission-approved permit. The fact that Marina's LCP was certified in '82 does not change the explicit language in the CDP. There's no law that changes that. Only the commission can change the condition language. The outfall CDP has been amended 6 times since Marina's LCP was certified, and each of those was processed by the commission, including in '92, where the commission confirmed that because the proposed development is an amendment to a commission-approved permit, it must be approved by the commission and not Marina. Next slide, please. This is consistent with the commission's practice throughout the state. The commission has repeatedly taken the position it maintains jurisdiction over amendments to CDPs it has issued, even after an LCP has been certified. I included one example from Dana Point on this slide. The commission's position and practice complies with Coastal Act 30519, which provides that once an LCP is certified, the commission does not retain, the Coastal Commission does not retain review authority over new development. This is not new development. It's a modification. Thank you very much.
Anybody else in the chamber? All right, seeing none, we'll go to our callers on Zoom. I think I saw.
We're going to hear from Adam Pinteritz.
Good evening, staff and board members. Thank you again for hearing my comment. This is Adam Pinteritz on behalf of the Monterey County Association of Realtors, but also speaking as a resident of Marina. I need to reiterate my question from earlier in the meeting. How much money has been spent on these lawsuits that have, to my knowledge, all failed? So, I'm sure the gentlemen who you heard from earlier in the evening are wonderful gentlemen who do their jobs well. But I candidly, as a Marina resident, I'm having some significant doubts about the efficacy of the legal strategy. And I guess I'll just put it very plainly. Tom, stop. Just stop, okay? It's time to take a step back. During the closed session, I received this very interesting push poll, which shamelessly slams some of the important stakeholders in Monterey County. But it seems to me that if we're talking about helping ratepayers who are on low income to better afford water, how much of that lawsuit money could have been spent helping those ratepayers? I ask you that, Tom. So, make no mistake, I am clearly here to say that there is a significant flaw in Marina's approach to this. And I'm quite disappointed in my leadership in Marina for not taking a step back and really thinking about more carefully what is in the best interests of Marina residents and what is a responsible use of our ratepayer funds. And with that, I'll conclude. Please, please approve the staff recommendation because this is ridiculous. We should just be moving forward.
Okay, we will now hear from Jeff Dobby.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good evening, everybody, members of the board, staff, and public. Thank you for this opportunity to be here today and speak through the electronic opportunity. My name is Jeff Davy. I'm the chair of the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses, and we are and have been a steadfast proponent of the Monterey Water Supply Project since 2012. The coalition strongly supports the staff recommendation for this item and encourages you to vote in accordance with their recommendation. As you just heard, submittal of an application to a separate agency does not trigger CEQA. M1 Water is not approving any outfall modifications by submitting the application, so no physical effect on the environment can occur that would trigger CEQA. M1 Water is not committing itself to a definite course of action concerning the outfall. CalAm and M1 Water have not entered any agreement allowing CalAm to implement the outfall modifications. M1 Water has not committed itself to implementing the outfall modifications. M1 Water has not committed any funds toward the outfall modifications. CalAm is reimbursing M1 Water for all CDP amendment application costs. CEQA review by M1 Water will occur when it considers the lease with CalAm. So again, we strongly encourage you to go with staff recommendation and approve this item. And thank you for this opportunity to speak.
All right, seeing no other public commenters, we'll bring it back to the board for motion and approval.
A motion to approve.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion, please?
Just a question, I guess, for Mr. Gilpin. Is there anything in the contract we just approved or this item that would prevent us from, let's say, next month bringing back a proposal to begin CEQA now?
Well, there's nothing that prevents you from doing it, but you don't have a project.
Well,
And as folks have said, and we've put forth to you, the submittal of an application to the Coastal Commission to amend your permit is not a project. Overall project was approved by the CPUC in a certified 2018 EIR. It is the lead agency on the project. The agencies, as recognized by the Court of Appeal in a decision in the Marina Coast case against CalAm, noted that there are other agencies involved who are responsible agencies. At this juncture on the CPUC permit, the Coastal Commission will be the responsible agency relative to the next step in CEQA compliance. And as the speakers, several of them noted, and as we've told the board, the CEQA position will come to this board at the time you consider a long-term lease and or construction project to implement the outfall improvements.
So you're saying if we get to a point where we approve some lease agreement, we will then at that point start CEQA?
At that point, you will be a responsible agency under the lead agency of the project, and we'll have to do environmental review to determine what CEQA document you may have to prepare, whether it's an addendum, subsequent EIR, or supplemental EIR. You don't know at this point because you'll have to tear off the analysis that's already been completed at that point in time by other agencies.
Wouldn't we be the lead agency since it's our project, or would be our project, assuming we come to a lease?
Be the responsible agency under a component of the CPUC project.
But we've just heard some testimony on what the truth is, that this is separate from the MPUSD CEQA analysis and project.
We've reviewed the documents that were represented to indicate that it was separate projects. I don't believe that is accurate. It's not the accurate position taken by the Coastal Commission. This is a complex project with various components as noted. The initial CEQA document adopted by the CPUC included a discussion of the outfall as part of the brine discharge and is a component of the project.
point out, absent any design whatsoever at that point in time, but okay.
You know, and I don't have a particular concern here except on the importance of the outfall. And I raised this a couple of meetings ago, and I just like to try to keep it in everybody's mind is, as we know, that outfall is extremely valuable. And I think we're only using 25% of it or something like that, give or take. And if Cal-Am comes in, they're only, I don't know, it's going to be less than that. So there's going to be a great deal of capacity in there. But as we look ahead here in the next months of this year, and particularly this in the next couple of months, with the projects that are being proposed by the GSA, we don't know what they are. It's going to be May before. Just today, I think we're talking about May 19th. There might be a joint meeting between the Water Resource Agency and the GSA on a menu of these projects, and give or take something around that date. These projects for groundwater sustainability, I mean, the one we do know about is this brackish water injection one, which is talking about it's $1 billion project. It would be involving pulling out anywhere from some of the proposals that have been put forth here early, and this is probably outdated now, but everywhere from 40,000 to 100,000 acre feet that could be pulled in and would be treated, and that's going to have to be coming out through the outfall too. And that's just where my concerns and questions was with future projects, because I just want to make, and I know there's other alternatives that are going to come up. I know there's some alternative ones. Probably everything is going to involve something to do with some brackish water, some injection, maybe some desalination. The brackish water project, I mean, $1 billion is most people I speak to up in my area, it's a pretty hard thing to swallow. But when we look at the scope of what's being looked at, we're looking at potentially up to $2 billion in projects. This is not the only one. It's huge, huge amounts. I want to just make sure, that all options are going to be open as those are under considerations on how it's going to be paid for and whatever is going to be done. Maybe we'll find out and we can get by a lot cheaper. But I do not want to see, the impact upon residents, upon businesses, upon agriculture with those kind of a bill is immense, absolutely immense. And, I, want to make sure that our outfall, it's the only one around. Everybody's going to need it who's getting involved in this. And that's where I want to make sure that whatever is being done there is not going to be impacted. And that includes how the Coastal Commission looks at this. I do not know how much they can tolerate coming out of there. If this project is ahead of other projects that are bigger, because these brackish water ones, some of them, it's talking about having 20 to 40,000 acre feet in desalinated water available, not for injection, but available to sell, which puts it into direct conflict with Cal-Am. And there has been no integration on all these different projects. Right? We got a $750 million project we're talking about. There's a lot of money being talked about here in this county in the next few months, the next few years that are being discussed. So, I guess what I'm looking at there is making sure that any approval from, or much assurance as I can, any approval from the Coastal Commission on this project would not impact what could be bigger projects, more critical projects that really impact what this county is going to do for water for the next 30 or 50 years, and projects that actually dwarf what Cal-Am's doing here. So I don't know if I can, have any answer on that just before we proceed.
So certainly I don't have a direct answer to your question, but it is certainly an option for the board to direct staff to go to SVB GSA or to Marina Coast or to others that have proposed desal projects that may need the outfall and see if they are open to contributing funds to look at what the hydraulic model looks like with all those flows going through the outfall in order to meet the ocean plan. So I think ultimately, whatever projects come in, hydraulically, we're probably pretty good unless it's above 80 million gallons per day. The unknown is with the different types of discharges, can we meet California Ocean Plan under all conditions? Now, I think as we've talked about here, the application is one thing. When we get to the point of negotiating a long-term lease, that is truly a trigger on and committing ourselves. It would seem to me that the board would want to understand what that preliminary hydraulic modeling would look like if other projects could comply with Ocean Plan.
If I'm understanding correct, so if we go ahead with this then, and this is for more clarification, as I think I do understand it, 6 months from now, this will come back after the application's been made, and that's where we can sit down and at that point, and maybe we'll have some of this information in hand. For example, on the chemical loading of what Cal-Am would do, what these other projects would do, we'll have a better idea upon them, and then we could make a decision. And I would recommend, if we could make an amendment onto this motion, that we do reach out to the GSA for perhaps those studies and understanding of potentially what they might be need too. So when we come back here in 6 months, we have an idea of how all this fits together, because that's the biggest problem right now. As I mentioned earlier, we do not have an integrated water policy in this county, and everybody's doing a different project. And I'm concerned about it fitting together.
So I hear a request for a friendly amendment. Does the motion maker?
Yeah.
Outside of the scope
I
of
think you're outside of the scope of the agenda item. I just.
May I offer
Direct,
just direct staff.
Staff to bring it
Okay.
back.
That's fine.
Committee meeting, get the next.
So I think, are you good here?
If we can have that, and as I understand, 6 months from now is when the real decision is going to be, but I just want to make sure we have all the right information and that how all this integrates.
Yes, and it's not just to the GSA, but I think it's to all the stakeholders, I think is what I'm tracking from Paul. And then I would just bring up one other element, and I appreciate you raising the supervisor. One of the things that I think is also important to look at is what does additional capacity look like for growth and expansion as well, right? So additional wastewater coming in as development happens. How are all these components of our current operations being measured along with these other elements? So just wanted to throw that in there as well. So another hand, but before I jump back to you, let me just check in with everybody else. Anybody else have additional thoughts, comments, please?
Just a comment. So, with, looking at, the outfall, with what Monterey One water uses and the, future Cal-Am use, I think that equals up to about 34%, like the outflow capacity. That's where we will be at. So we'll have 66% still capacity, but everything goes on with what Paul said, what types of waters and all that.
So just one other follow-up question. Since the board has approved revision number 2 to a contract that we approved back in 2003 that calls for these permits requested, these permit revisions to be requested. Is there anything in that process or anything in that contract that would preclude Monterey One Water from simply voluntarily submitting a coastal development permit application simultaneously or shortly thereafter to the city of Marina? Is there anything that would preclude that?
For the agreement, you agreed to submit it to the Coastal Commission.
I don't think there's anything specific in the agreement that would preclude it. It is specific in stating that we would submit a CDP application to Coastal, though.
Yeah, I'm just proposing ideas that might head off litigation from various directions. Anyway, if wanted the answer to that question.
I just wanted to, I have one question for staff, and it's kind of on the same topic as it relates to the comments of the claim of Marina, the city of Marina's jurisdiction over it. If Jim, you had any thoughts on that as it relates to the public comment we received?
Yeah, well, I've heard the public comments. We've analyzed the situation. And I think a couple of things. One is this concept that the Coastal Commission has jurisdiction over permits it issues prior to the certification of an LCP is consistent with the Coastal Commission's own interpretation. And I've provided examples of its own interpretations, its guidance that have been previously issued to counties and coastal cities, all of which state that the Coastal Commission retains jurisdiction over permits it has issued. And the other simplicity here is that this is consistent with how the Coastal Commission has treated this specific permit ever since it was issued and after the certification of an LCP by the city of Marina. And you've heard the examples that Matt provided. The glowing example to me is the application by Marina Coast Water District to annex its jurisdiction into M1W. That was taken to the Coastal Commission, who in its own report found that it, not the city of Marina, had jurisdiction over that. So the jurisdiction, that's how it's been applied and interpreted during the entire time this permit has been in place. So I hope that answers.
No, it does. Thank you for it. And just a final thought. I think that being said, and I think outside of the obvious of the Coastal Commission is driving this train in a lot of ways. And so if they're giving us an interpretation that they have jurisdiction over it, I find it hard to find a compelling argument to say that we should shift it over to the city of Marina or add a step to the process. I mean, we all know how government works in the bureaucratic process, and we don't need to add more to our plate. So I would just offer that the city of Marina can speak during public comment and provide its feedback and input to the Coastal Commission as it make its determination. And they can also continue to provide public comment here with us as we continue to navigate the experience as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. With that, we're going to move on to item D. Don't feel like you have to hang out if you don't want to. Please, actually, let's take 3 minutes to allow. Righty. And with that, we are going to move on to item 10D to receive an update on wastewater rate study and direct staff on duration and upper limit of proposed revenue adjustments for fiscal year 27 through fiscal year 2031. With that, I'll pass it to Paul for staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Williamson. So we've talked about this a couple months now, and we're just sort of stepping through the process of our rate making. We have the slides, please. So this is somewhat unusual compared to how we've done it in the past. And it's just based on the rate study that we performed and the compressed nature. So next slide, please, whenever you get there. So in February, the board reaffirmed keeping the rate structure the same. We talked about some different options. You said keep the rate structure the same. That was very helpful because we were able to kick it out to our consultant, Wildan, to look at the rate structure for residential. In terms of wastewater service, and I've gone to many of your boards and councils, your members or you provide the service from the house into the street to our pump stations and our conveyance. Our role is that larger conveyance and treatment. Currently, we're at $54 a month. So just to keep that in mind. In terms of the process, I know you haven't seen the rate study yet, and part of it is what the decision we're asking the board to make tonight, which is what is the duration you're comfortable with in a Prop 218, and what are the upper limits for increases over whatever that duration may be. What is driving us to ask you this now before you've seen the rate study itself? It's frankly timing. We need to develop the Prop 218 notice and go to print by April 13th before the next board meeting. April 27th, you will see that final rate, the 218 notice, but right now we're just looking at the percentages. Can we go to the next slide now? So the study is substantially done, and Wildan is online. I believe I saw Chris Fisher on there. Is Alice or Michael? No? Okay, so Chris Fisher will be the one that will be helping us out and just talking to you a little bit about the determining our revenue requirement and how it translates to rates. In looking back historically, since I've been here at least, we started from 2014 when I got here, we had a Prop 218 in effect. In 2017, we went to Bartle Wells at the time, Bartle Wells and Associates out of Berkeley, California, and they did a rate study for us. They did a rate study and capacity fee. Since then, we have updated internally based on that Bartle Wells approach. So updated the spreadsheet, put in our O&M budget, capital budget, and so on. This year, we've asked Wildan to do that. So Chris, are you online? Can you hear me?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do now is just turn over to Chris, let him introduce himself, as well as go over that rate making part of it, of what they've done and how it's going to affect us. I'll get back to in terms of the percent increases that we're requesting, the whys, and when you're going to see that rate study. So Chris.
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, members of the board. Chris Fisher with Wildan Financial Services. Go ahead, Shay, you can advance to the next slide. So as Paul mentioned, I've been working with my team, Alice and Michael, and I should say a very collaborative process with staff at the district, starting back in the fall to conduct this rate study to arrive at the point where we are today. And so I want to talk a little bit about the rate study itself, the steps we've gone through, and the recommendations. So the study is built really around three primary phases: the development of the long-term financial plan, the cost of service analysis, and then the design of the rates. The focus up until now has been mostly on the financial plan, and that's a process, a rigorous process that we go through to determine the amount of revenue that's required, and that's made up of a number of things. We take a rigorous look at the past historical financial performance, the historical expense trends. We build a model that projects financial performance out 10 years. We are only permitted under Prop 218 to approve rates for 5 years, but we want to take a longer look. We don't want to leave the district hanging at the edge of a cliff at year 5 with no idea, no visibility of what's going to go on after that. So that plan is built out to 10 years. And the revenue requirement is made up of a number of things. It's the maintenance and operating costs, the cost of capital projects that are part of the district's capital improvement plan. That capital improvement plan is built through ongoing long-term planning efforts and system analysis, system assessments to determine capital projects necessary to maintain the operating integrity and safety of the system, to ensure that you're able to provide uninterrupted service to your residents and maintain compliance with all of the various regulations, and also repayment of any debt and funding of adequate reserves. And the debt repayment also, along with that, there are two issues that are going to be paid off relatively soon here in the current fiscal year. But for any anticipated future debt that may be undertaken, we want to ensure that there's an adequate level of coverage, debt service coverage, so that when the time comes, when the district is going to the financial markets, if that happens, that the resiliency and financial health of the district is evident by those who evaluate such things, and so any terms of any debt at that point would be favorable. So all of those things get wrapped up into that revenue requirement so that we can make a determination for each of the coming 5 years how much revenue is required for essentially the district to meet all of its financial objectives. And we compare that to the amount of revenue that can be generated under the existing rates. And so we take a look at all the historical customer data, billing data, do an analysis of that, reconcile it to historical audited financials, so that we know that that data is tight. And to the extent that there is a difference between the amount of revenue that can be generated under the existing rates and the amount of revenue required over the coming 5-year period to meet all of those financial needs that I described, then we recommend a series of revenue adjustments. So the next two steps are very tightly linked. The cost of service analysis takes all of those costs that are part of that revenue requirement, all those maintenance and operating costs and capital projects and debt service and all those things, and it assigns those net costs out to functional operating components and then further out to customer groups, so that eventually we can proceed with designing rates for each of those different types of customers that, when taken in the aggregate, will generate the amount of revenue needed to come back to the beginning and meet that revenue requirement. So we have gone through that process. The financial plan has been completed. The cost of service and rate design has been completed to the point it can, pending guidance from the board tonight and confirmation of what we're asking tonight. The steps needed to complete that are very short. It's just essentially finalizing everything based on approval of the board. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So the results of that financial analysis led to recommendations to adjust revenue for each of the 5 years in the amounts you see at the table at the bottom there. And so again, that financial analysis, when we compared the needs and the required revenue over the 5-year period and what could be realized under the existing rate structure, we're recommending a series of 8% increases for the first 3 years and then 9% increases for the final 2 years. And I think this is consistent with what you've heard at previous meetings. And we've just continued to refine and work through different options and alternatives with staff, to make sure we've got this pinned down as tightly as we can, and we've looked at every different alternative that we can. So as I mentioned, that we're just looking at the first 5 years worth of increases. That's all we're allowed under Prop 218, but we're taking into account what's coming down the line in terms of future capital needs and making sure that operating reserves and capital reserves are being funded at an appropriate level to leave the district well prepared to take on any capital projects, any unexpected capital needs, to maintain operating reserves, to manage cash flow needs, and be in good shape financially for those projects, and eventually if you're going to go to the financial markets to borrow any money for any portion of that. So the next slide. I think that'll turn this back over to Paul.
Thanks, Chris. Actually, can we go back to that last slide, John? So I also want to point out, and I think you all know this, within Prop 218, what we're doing here is we're setting that upper limit for future years. It doesn't tie the board's hands in what you're going to have as an increase in future years. We'll come back to you every year. So hypothetically, in 2028, we get a $50 million grant. All of a sudden, we can pay for some of the capital, and I know I'm pointing at Matt, and I don't intend to. So we could come back going, hey, we don't think we need 8% because we just got this $50 million grant for this project. We would redo that model and determine what we think is necessary. Conversely, if something happens in the economy, and I think back to doing this back in 2008-9, the whole market crash thing where everything slid off into the negative. I had a board at the time where we had an approved 5% rate increase for those years, and each year they reduced it to 2% and 3%, just trying to understand the community and what they were going through. So you have that flexibility throughout the 5 years, just as a reminder.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The notice itself will have all of the rates that are the maximum approved rates. And Paul, I would just point more currently, we saw many agencies during the COVID period approve something less than the maximum authorized rate increase due to the economic uncertainties then.
Thanks for making me feel old, Chris. Appreciate that. Next slide, please. So we focus in on our financial objectives, and generally speaking, they're trying to stay customer focused, reliable service, keeping our level of service where it's at, our legal or fiscal responsibilities, and staying creditworthy. Because as Chris mentioned, with the amount of capital projects we have going on, more than likely we will be doing a borrowing or a bond issuance in the 27-28 timeframe and later on in that 10-year plan. Next slide, please. So customer focused, the budget process. Just so you know, we, as an agency, we roll up our budgets from each department. And it rolls up to Tammy and Steve and Matt and everything. I get to be the hatchet man and try to cut the budget, or when Lawrence and I would actually sit there and go over the budget and scrutinize it. When we realized that things didn't match up in terms of bringing a budget that balances to you, we went back to staff in general for the O&M side and said, you need to cut by 5%. We need to get down to a point where we're not dipping into reserves and we're maintaining our fiscal health. We also looked at the capital project list. Now, Matt and Tammy do a great job in terms of looking at the projects that are needed based on the operations, maintenance, and certainly condition assessment side. What we did to Matt was, we can't afford the projects you have on your list that are necessary. So we slid them out. So they're in a 10-year time frame. When you slide them out into your years 11, 12, 13, it takes it off of the amounts that we give to Wildan to do that revenue requirement. So we've gone through the cuttings fairly significantly while still trying to maintain our level of service and address some of those needs at the treatment plant and pump stations. Another thing from a customer perspective, we know that these rate increases, although if you look at them on a dollar basis, it's increasing $4 a month, which in the grand scheme of things probably isn't that much, but to a lot of people, it is a lot. So we do have a customer assistance program. And in the past, the board has voted to contribute about $200,000 of non-rate revenue into a fund that low-income customers can apply for. I believe last year, well, it says here we had 925 customers that benefited from that. I think we had about 50 that applied that we had run out of funds ballpark. So as part of the budget process, which we'll get to in May, if the board would like, we can try to increase that a little bit, knowing if we increase rates, it could impact more people. Another thing, just from a customer focus perspective, we look at comparables, like who else in our area, what are the rates, and are we in the ballpark now and in the future? So next slide, please. These are some of our local wastewater services for 2026. And you can see that the median is about $77, whereas on the bottom, there's our rate, which is $54 a month. And then the average of you entities that add to it come to a total of $73.46. So we're in the ballpark of being just below median. Obviously, there's some outliers there that you see, and there's others that are much lower. But we always do this check just to make sure we're in the realm of being reasonable with the rates from just a comparable perspective. Next slide, please. I mentioned the reliable service thing. Obviously, we need to keep our plant running, our pump stations, interceptors, and so on. So we have that base budget, but in looking to the future, we do apply certain inflation factors. There's general inflation, but for us, I mentioned utilities. Our utility bill is about $9 million a year. Historically, that's going up frankly, far greater than 8%, but we have an 8% factor in there, which is the entire rate increase that we're requesting on all of our rates. Chemicals also going up 8% per year. We do about $8.25 million in chemical purchases per year. And then, of course, capital. I think you all from your cities and districts know capital projects are expensive and construction costs are increasing. We have about 500.
Hey, Paul, I'm not sure if it's important right now. Your video, for anybody who's watching the public, your video looked like it went out there momentarily. I don't know if staff already knows that, but just thought I'd.
Yeah, can you see the slide now, Chris?
I can see the slide, but the camera went out. I'm not sure if the camera matters, but I just thought I'd let you know that just in case. There, now it's back. There we go.
Minimize the camera so that
Yeah.
All
People
good.
say I have a face for radio, so we wanted to make sure the slide is on there. So construction costs, we all know they're going up with about $540 million over the 10 years. It's not a straight $54 million a year over the 10 years. It sort of goes up, comes back down a little bit, and then increases later. But that's all been baked into the reliable service side of things. Next slide, please. So this just talks a little bit here about what we're looking at and what are some of the larger programs and projects. Conveyance system are pump stations and interceptors, treatment plant improvements that we have talked about, and Matt will be doing a presentation on our treatment plant master plan coming months. Solids handling, I think you all know that recent Assembly Bill 1383, Senate Bill 1383 has changed how we deal with our solids, so we need to adapt as well. And then, of course, we've talked about our utility power and how unreliable it is, let alone how expensive it is getting for all of us in trying to have more control over those expenses. On the bottom there, you see the proposed capital spending over the 5-year period between now and 2031, which this represents. What we are asking the board to do is a 5-year Prop 218. So about $243 million over that 5 years. Next slide, please. So this looks at the next 10 years. So not within this Prop 218, but the next 10 years. And the point of this is there's still a lot to be done. Oftentimes I get the question like, great, so you're going to spend $243 million. Does it stop then? And it doesn't. Matt has actually 15 years of projects planned in terms of the needs of our system, and which is about $1 billion. Talk about the $1 billion mark, about $1 billion worth of stuff that we own, operate, maintain for the community. So we're trying to renew that over time. Many of you know this. This agency went 12 years without a rate increase and 14 out of 17 years without a rate increase. So obviously that compounding effect over the period of time put us in not the best financial position. We've been trying to increase rates over the last few years to the point where we actually have reserves now, which can help our bond rating, which I'll get to in a little bit, but we want to continue that. And hence the reason you're seeing some of these large expenditures, because we didn't do it in the past. In the 14 through probably 2020 timeframe, we were doing about $3 to $4 million a year of just trying to keep things together. And now it's truly looking at our system in a systematic way, putting up with what needs to occur. So Chris mentioned the 2 debt issuances we have that will be ending soon, which we're thankful for to get rid of that debt. However, if we were to show you the pro formas of needs over the 10-year, like I said, in that 27, 28 timeframe, there's going to probably be an issuance or a borrowing. And then also in 32, 33, it's just our capital needs are so large, we can't sustain it with our 65,000 customers on a pay-as-you-go. We do need to rely on some borrowing. We do have a WIFIA loan through EPA right now that started with the Pure Water expansion project. Luckily, we're able to use it for some of our renewable energy projects. And we will certainly try, although it's not guaranteed, to use our state revolving fund through the State Water Resources Control Board. That's the program that we did for the first phase of Pure Water, where we got 1% funds, which is highly unusual. There's a lot of hoops that you have to go through and restrictions, but it generally has lower rates. Not a guarantee, but we'll see how that goes. Oh, I want to talk about our reserve policy. We didn't used to have a reserve policy. We did institute one in 2019 to try to be more fiscally responsible. Here's what it is. that was reported in the 25-26 budget book, so what you saw last year. And we're trying to get there. We're not there yet. We're not going to be at 20% of the 10-year capital, probably by 2030 to 31. I'm of the belief, after we get through this fiscal year and the early next, I'd like to revisit that reserve policy, because our capital project list is so large now, it may be prudent to reduce this number, that 20% you see there, that's a requirement, but still have enough cash on hand to look good to the rating companies, as well as have a number of days of cash on hand. But I think there's some ways that we can optimize this for where we're at today. We're in a lot different position than we were in 2019 when this originated. But as we're here, we're going to try to meet the policies as best as we can. Obviously, we're meeting our debt service coverage ratios. We have to, and frankly, we're doing better than that 1.5. And rating companies like that. We sit on the phone and do our ratings with Moody's and S&P, everyone else, just like you do. One of the things that we like, or they like, I should say, is the cash on hand for the number of days. The target of having at least a year's worth of cash for your O&M and salaries and benefits in reserves. So we have that. We're just trying to build it so we get a better bond rating, thereby having a better interest rate when those issuances happen. Rate design, we talked about this in February. There's no change to the rate structure, which is really nice. The projection period that we're looking at and what we're requesting of the board is to do a 5-year Prop 218. So from now through 2031. And so this is what it looks like. We're at $54 now. If the board approves the staff recommendation, and then on top of that, each year has the maximum amount of rate increase, this would be the wastewater rates. So for 26-27, $58.10. In 2031, at the maximum that would be in the Prop 218 that we're requesting, it would go up to $80.50. The median down below is just combining, because oftentimes, I think it happened at Pacific Grove. One of the women commented that that's great that we're talking about the $54 a month, but their bill is much greater. It's what PG adds to it. So we try to look at it apples to apples as best we can in looking at the median of where we're at. So that's the monthly increase. So, we had some comments before of what about low use? I have a house, I live in it by myself. Why am I paying the same as someone who has 10 people in their house? As we talked about last month, we don't have the flow data, so we really can't make a low use rate that is part of Prop 218 because we don't have the data. However, in order to try to address that issue or interest that some of you have brought up, we thought, and actually I think Chris came up with the idea of an exception. So instead of having a rate that would have to go through Prop 218 and would have to be built into the rate model, if we did an exception, it would just be a loss of revenue for the number of people that apply for it. What would it look like? So what you have here is a 15% reduction on your bill if you qualify for a low use rate. Why 15%? There's been a number of studies that show the fixed expenses for water and wastewater utilities, it's about 85%. So whether a drop goes down the drain or not, about 85% of the expenses exist. 15% is those variables, power, chemicals, etc. So we thought, if someone can prove that they are truly in a low use scenario, you give them a 15% reduction. If you look, right there, annual savings, about $100 right now at our current rate, it would increase to $145. How did we come up with 115 gallons per day? Well, the state is driving all of us in the state to about 47 gallons per capita per day. That's going to be a mandated requirement. So we assumed the house has 2.5 people, which is average. It's about 118 gallons. So if you're below that, you should be able to qualify for a low use exception. There would be an administrative fee that you pay up front, and then every year you need to provide your water bill data, because we don't have access to it during the winter period. Not when you're irrigating, but when there's only, hopefully only in-house usage to show that you're at 118 gallons per day or less. So that validation would continue to occur every year if you signed up. Based on what we've seen in low use on the commercial side, just the percentage, we expected somewhere under 1,000 people would actually do this. When I don't say people, 1,000 accounts. So if 1,000 accounts were to do this, the loss of revenue per year is what you see below. It's substantive, but it provides an option for those that are interested in a low use exception. There are other options out there. This seemed the most equitable to address it and reasonable to administer at this point in time. We just wanted to give you we know we don't have the Prop 218, we know you don't have the rate study in front of you, but we wanted to give you just some ideas of what the commercial rates would look like, and picked a business government office per 10 employees or a medical office per physician. And so you see how it increases over time. And just as an example, this building, so our administrative offices, between 21 to 30 people, our current monthly rate is $102. $102.30. For 2027, it would go up to $109.05. So that's sort of the magnitude of increase we're talking about in that 1 year for an office such as this, just as an example. Next slide, please. So here we are at the end of March, and what we're asking the board is to please provide direction and approve whatever duration Prop 218 you're comfortable with, as well as those upper ranges of rate increases. What we are requesting, and I'll say it later, is a 5-year with increases of 8%, 8%, 8%, 9%, 9%. The reason this is so critical is we do have a tight time frame. You need to generate that Prop 218, go to print on April 13th, and then April 27th, we're going to come back with a final wastewater study and that Prop 218 process. It's mailed to everyone on May 4th. We also want to get a couple bill stuff in stating what we're doing. And we're going to have 2 informational sessions, one in Salinas and one in Marina. And that's the first week of June, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Totally bad. So the Prop 218s go out May 4th. There is that legal objection period and written protest period. At the June board meeting is when we have the public hearing and the board meeting to approve whatever you're going to approve at the time. We continue with customer communication as you see here. And so I'd like to go to that outreach portion. The next slide, please. Rich, do you want to chat at all about this? I mean, I got to emphasize, we're on a relatively tight time frame here, and it's the same process that we've gone through. So there's been a lot of work that Rachel and her team have done in hiring consultants to help out, as well as, frankly, plan and try to squish this in the months we have.
I offer one thing, because I don't know where the rest of the board is on this. Could we maybe table this, and if there's a question as it relates to the outreach plan, we can circle back to that. Is that something?
Absolutely. Oh, crap. Yeah. I just saw the time. Sorry. So I guess we're off the hook for a little bit. So the staff recommendation is, like I mentioned, the 5-year, and as you see before you, with those as the upper limit of the rate increase. The reasons for it, as you've heard, frankly, the capital improvement plan that is pretty robust, $540 million over 10 years, trying to maintain our reserves so as to look good in the rating agency's eyes and maintain our level of service over the time frame. And with that, I and or staff can answer any questions.
So I have two questions. First one may be fairly easy. Something that I kind of don't like is it rising in the last 2 years to 9%. So if we did 9% in 2027, what would be the ramifications for the rest of the percentages to bring us to the same point at the end of 5 years? Question one.
Okay. That's not as easy as you thought, Tom.
But we have consultant there.
We do. And I'm sure he's running it as we speak. So if you remember going back 5 years, actually, that's how we had it proposed, is we had the higher ones up front because you get the benefit of compounding, and we flipped it. That's the only reason we did it this way. We could have done what you said. So if I were to guess, and we would have to confirm it, if you did a 9%, you could probably drop that last year to 8 or drop 2030, both of them to 8. Once again, you get that extra 1% compounding over the 5-year time frame.
I was hoping maybe you could drop both of those to 7 and end up in the same place.
You wouldn't end up in the same place.
Close to.
What you would do, if you drop the last 2 to 7 and had the first one at 9, and this is a ballpark, please understand, your cash on hand would actually, your reserves could increase over that time frame, or would increase over that time frame, but your days cash on hand would decrease because our budget's going up over that time frame. So it's sort of a push-pull. But it's fine. I mean, that isn't an option that's open to the board.
Then the second is more an administrative question for those businesses and physicians' offices. Often those folks are leasing a building, and we don't necessarily know whether the landlord's paying the bill or the particular business is paying the bill. So how do you find out how many staffers are there, or how many physicians are there to actually calculate the bill?
And this is wonderful because Lindsay is trying to avoid eye contact as we speak. And I'm going to ask her, as our customer service supervisor and expert on this stuff, to try to answer that question up here, please.
At the mic.
Lindsay? I know.
Sorry, Lindsay.
That's why you're looking.
I had to stand in front of a podium in front of you for many years. So turnabout's fair play.
So in the calculation of the physician rate, they look at different things. So when we're billing for the physician, we're assuming their staff is included in that. So the front staff, the check-in staff, et cetera, that's why we charge per physician. So that encompasses everybody else who works for the physicians as well.
How do you find out how many physicians are in that particular
Well, we
account?
right, well, over years of, we use the internet a lot to look at doctors who are on. A lot of the times doctors, there'll be 10 physicians, but only 5 at a time, right? Because they don't all work. So we'll bill them only at 5 physicians. So in cases where we've heard of doctors and bill them, when we send a letter, when they call, then we speak with people and make arrangements. So
What about other non-physician businesses that just have employees? How do you find out how many employees they have working in the building?
well, 1 to 10, 11 to 20. So we do letters and we inspect. We try to get out and site visit. So that's the goal. And that really helps keep the customer base billing through both sides, as far as people who are left and we shouldn't be billing for, as well as people who are there that we didn't know about. And not metering, that's really we get reports from all of the cities where people have finished permits. So of course we know we're billing them. When we look at the newspapers, we look online, we look at Facebooks, because people will have grand openings so we can see when they are. So we try to use the internet as much as possible. And then we also go.
Your staff is very busy.
We are.
Thank you.
So, we hear about the doctor's offices and how do we monitor commercial visitor service such as hotels? I know, didn't we talk previously about some type of meter? Or I know we did it over at Marriott, so I'm just gonna throw it out there. So how does that affect, will that affect the businesses since we are tourists, a tourist county, so destination?
So in reference to the Marriott over there, they requested a lower capacity fee because they were anticipating lower flows than we were calculating. So on that one, there was an exception made by the board to base it on flow metering. So they needed to flow meter both buildings to determine what their rate was going to be. But absent that, like normally, the question is, it's just based on the number of rooms, restaurants, and all that good stuff, right?
We serve breakfast, continental breakfasts that are hot, et cetera. We put in a category for food service along with their hotel rate. The big hotels like the Marriott, and the Sheraton, it's not Sheraton anymore. Think of the big ones.
Portola.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, the Sheraton. Anyway, those are actually billed. We call those special users because they're more full service. They have a laundry facilities where they're laundering all of everything, even for their customers. There's restaurants, there's bars, and they actually input their usage annually. And then we bill those large ones on their usage to make it fair because the room rate isn't fair. So it covers everything they do. And then we give them what we call a special user. And there's about 5 large hotels that fall into that category. All the other motel hotels fall into the category of the room. And then we also have a smaller one, which is bed and breakfast, which is a lower rate for the smaller, tiny hotels. They will qualify for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One question. What's the difference between April and May? Why April instead of May?
For the Prop 218?
Right.
Oh, thank you. I was like, because we would like our budget to be approved at the board meeting in June. So just working backwards, we need to have 45 days prior to that public hearing when the Prop 218 needs to go out. So it's all dictated within the legislation of timeframes. So as to start the new fiscal year with a budget with rates. Also, so as not to confuse customers, we like to have some consistency, not starting rate increases mid-year and things like that.
It was, we have concerns, no rate study. And so that's even very well done, very well thought out. We need to see the rate study. And that's really where Salinas is, and that's not me in a vacuum. We are concerned, no rate study. And
may I ask?
And the concern will likely be expressed with not supporting moving forward this month. But I can just, if you are sitting in our chair, and I understand, and I'm like Glenn, there's a lot of things converging on this, cities and counties that are hugely expensive. And, you know, when I lie awake at night, it's who's going to pay for the future, and everything's expensive. But I think we owe it to our residents that we have completely looked before we leapt, particularly on a 218. So that's why I want to be clear on what's the difference. And I do respect the budget process, but budgets, you know, they're not an exact science. And so, you know, I think things can be calibrated, particularly with the caliber of work you've done. But from, you know, from our perspective, we need to see that rate study. So that's why I wanted to ask, you know, what's the difference between April and May in terms of getting information in front of us?
If I may? And Chris, I'm going to ask you a question too. So, ballpark, printing all the Prop 218s, it's about a little over $8,000, $8,500. So depending what the board votes on or doesn't vote on today, we would move forward with printing. Chris, I know we have the schedule of the rate study going to the board for the April board meeting, the 27th or whatever it is. From a timing perspective, when do you think you would have it finalized if the board were to vote on a Prop 218 duration and upper limit today?
Having the report finalized, Paul?
Yes.
We've already started on the framework of the report, so our objective is to have a draft ready for you and your staff's review by this Friday, and then having that final for distribution the following week by the 10th.
So be able to go to the Budget Personnel Committee.
Yes.
Okay. So it's coming, but you're right, you don't have it tonight.
That's just me. I mean, the vote can proceed without me, and I'm not gonna, play around with weighted votes or any of that stuff. But at this point, I can't support it without seeing it.
Thank you for saying that. To try to assuage your concern and anyone else's. So it looks like we would have the rate. So the revenue requirement's there. You haven't seen it, but that's what all this is predicated on. You would have the final rate study to the BPC, potentially to the whole board on the 10th. We, the staff, could gamble on whatever is voted on that will be voted on April 27th and go print just so we can try to hit those dates. April 27th is the actual day timeframe where the board makes a decision of like, yeah, here's the rate study, we accept it, and yes, go forth and get these Prop 218s out of here.
And I would, like I say, I would just share that this is not me speaking.
No.
It has been a discussion. This is the concern we have. I think, and it's easy for me to be casual about $4. And I appreciate the customer assistance programs, and we would probably have to follow suit, along with. So we want to work with it, and as much as folks don't want to hear it, you can run, but you can't hide from what's coming. But in order to be responsive to our residents, we just feel that's important that we have seen all the information. Even though it's very clear this is well considered and good work has been done and everyone's trying to do the best they can for very logical reasons. But just, we have that issue, which is why I want to ask that question. Checking with the rest of the board. Anybody else have questions?
I've got a couple of questions and a comment, and I know we talk about $4 and it's not a lot, but when you look at this over the next until 2031, you're talking about over 45% at the end of that. And I think, I don't want to be cavalier about it's only $4, because I know a lot of my residents are going to look at this and be concerned. I understand, PG&E is going up. We see it. Everything else has gone up. I don't think that's going to be coming down at any foreseeable future. I think we're about to end up in a really bad place. I do agree with looking at the reserves, because if you're just holding money, but construction cost is going up 20% year over year, that 100,000, well, in this case, that $1 million project, is going to be 1.2 million next year, and it's just going to keep rolling from there. So I do think that the cash management piece is going to be very important. The question I would like to ask is, what is the definition of a residential vacant? And I wouldn't be horrified to have them pay more. I'm just going to say that on behalf of the citizens of Pacific Grove.
So that is a rate that's in our rate structure for a house that has no one in it.
And people, I assume, file that and then we monitor their water usage to see if that's actually the truth? And is there a number by city of those people that have applied for a vacancy exemption or a non-use?
I see, I can tell you right now, we have around 60. There's
Okay. I know it feels like a lot more. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Real quick. So, Paul, you showed that one slide where it showed the jurisdictions and what the rates are, and we're right there within the average. Do you have any visibility on increases that those jurisdictions are gonna impose in the future? Because I mean, that's what we're talking about. We know we're kind of within the average.
Yeah.
But are we within the average when you look at other jurisdictions?
In 5 years.
Yeah.
So right now we're a little below median. I don't know that we have any information, if any of them have Prop 218s where they've projected out their rate increases. Okay. We can certainly try to find those. Did you have something, Jim? No? Okay. We can certainly try to find those. I mean, we're below median now. We'll probably be at median in 5 years. Once again, depending what the board chooses each year moving forward.
I was just curious if that was something.
My question was along the lines of Director Rao's question. Are we counting Airbnbs or short-term rentals? I know we mentioned hotels, small hotels, but
that would just be a residential rate, correct?
chart.
What's the call for that? What about like ADUs? Which is the mic on the ADU one? ADUs.
Are considered, if you're a junior ADU by the state, that means that your garage is where that is not considered an addition. Anything other than a junior. Some of the
Okay, so going back to the proposition of the upper limit. The past 218 we had the 5 years, we hit that upper limit from time, correct?
We did.
And then you're saying that every year, the board will decide with your verification of, you know, if we need to or not. And we'll vote on it, correct?
Absolutely, yes. And it'll probably be done, well, we'll try to get an indication earlier so we can build a budget around something. But yes, you will have, then when you adopt the budget, we'll vote on whatever a rate increase is or is not that year.
Okay. And then my next question with the PG&E being so high, and I know there's a lot of, you know, there's a regen connection. When is that gonna actually take place? Regen, the natural, renewable natural gas.
So yeah, there's two things. One is the regen connection, which is under process now.
That's going to be completed and operational in the summer, but it's only going to benefit the advanced water filtration facility. It's not going to,
Which is another 2.5 years out, 3 years out. So trying to take control a little bit of the power usage, the rates for the wastewater customers. We're not going to benefit the wastewater customers until 2029.
And as far as what Director Donahue is talking about in terms of actually having a study in hand, will there be an opportunity for us to just say, for example, you guys went ahead and before our meeting, we presented that
Yes.
in ample time before the meeting?
So I would contend, instead of just getting it to the BPC, which will get a presentation on it, when we get the final report from Wildan on the 10th, we'll send it to everyone. The report. The Prop 218 notice will also go out because we should have it developed by then. And then come April 27th, if the board votes tonight, you have the option to go, no, we didn't like what, and we know we gave you direction, staff, but we don't like that based on what we're seeing. We wanted something less. In that case, we would throw out what we printed and start over, and then we'd be in that May scenario. So you have, I'm not going to say another bite at the apple, but you have a vote from April 27th.
Then my last point, sorry for being so long, but on the discount, so you're gonna have that $200,000 set aside, and you're gonna have this discount program as well. So there's gonna be
So it's a little different than the customer assistance program. The customer assistance program, we are providing money from non-rate revenue, penalties, liens, things like that. And we're asking the board to put it into a bucket so then we can hand it out to various customers. On the exception, it is just going to be considered lost revenue depending how many people. Yes, there is. So if I am a single person, low income, I could do my low income exception and then apply for a customer assistance program. But on the bill, I'd be paying the lower amount. So what a customer assistance program provides is 4 months of rates. It would just be a lesser amount. So you could double dip, but customer service would trap within the database.
we're not gonna cap the low one.
No, the 1,957 or whatever we had here, that estimate is based on this similar percentages or what we feel is the upper end of people that would apply, because it does take some effort. You need to come in, you need to pay whatever the administrative cost is, and then every year you're providing us with water bills.
Can I just add that if we do receive direction to pursue a low use exception, we would want to vet the program more and bring it back to you in its entirety as a resolution, specifically outlining the details of that program, and some of this would become more clear. It does not, because it would be offset by non-rate revenue. And part of why we would want to bring it back with resolution is verifying that the non-rate revenue sources are there.
Briefly, but I do share some of the concerns about the 45. I'm would really be interested in seeing.
Get thirsty again. I'll get back to you on that one.
Obviously, it's not my field.
Um, so a couple of things. Of course, hearing by so I also think it's important to contextualize it, make sure that operating the agency where it needs to be. And a big part of my driver, as I sit on the board, is thinking about the long-term sustainability. Of course, measuring that the here and now. But I think something that's often put on the back burner, which is why we are in this position now, is because past boards failed to do the rate increases when we needed them. And so we can't kick the can down the road for sake of today and not think about future generations. And my hope in all of us is that we want to set the future up for success. And so in as much as it is alarming, jarring, I also am eager to see the study. But I think we have a professional, reliable staff that's working with the consultant to come up with a plan that that we should consider. And I think the saving grace for us here is we don't have to increase the rate at the amounts identified. Yes, our past 4 years or 5 years has shown that I've increased the rate to the full amount, but we have that discretion, and I'd encourage the board to leverage that discretion as we move forward. A couple of things. There's the application fee for those that wanted to get the reduced monthly rate. Is that application fee cover the cost for the agency to run that program?
We're going to try to do a nexus study on that, but that's the intent.
Okay.
However, we also want to be cognizant of the fact of it. They save $100 over a year. We don't want a $300 application rate. We want to make sure it is reasonable that people are seeing a benefit.
They actually apply for it if they need it. They're right. Okay. And then it's always a balance to try to figure out how do you help those that need help. And so I appreciate staff's effort of trying to find a way of addressing this. There's competing pieces to it. On the one side, the goal may be to focus on the most vulnerable people in our population. The other might be to focus on a larger net of vulnerable people in the population, but maybe some that aren't hurting as much. And so to the customer assistance program, the point that you were making, there was about 50 people that applied that didn't get it because we ran out of funding. And so do we expand that net? Do we reduce it? And how does it all balance out? And a thought that I had was, you had mentioned 15% because we're expecting 85% of that rest, fixed cost. But that doesn't mean that they're not using anything, I'm assuming. So do we want to consider, a different percentage perhaps to maybe more accurately reflect where they might be coming in at? So there's still a reduction, but maybe not the full 15% in regards to what was proposed. So just kind of put that out there as a thought. And then thought also came to my mind in regards to the vacant properties rates. I just wonder how that compares to that. And I actually agree. I mean, if somebody has a vacant property that's sitting there, perhaps them paying the full rate could help incentivize them to get that unit filled, which is more of I would argue, a moral argument in regards to the ability to not house people that we've been through. One of the things that I think would be helpful to see is a comparison of what our capital project goals were over the last Prop 218 and what we actually did. Because I am imagining that what we're seeing from this rate study, the largest chunk of it is the capital. And so how much did we say that we were going to do this last time, and how much did we actually achieve? I think just kind of seeing looking at our math a little bit would be helpful. I just want to make a comment about reserves. It kind of goes back to the point that I made at the beginning. I'm a big believer in having robust, healthy reserves. So I'm a little bit hesitant on pulling back because of those very reasons that I made earlier. But I can be convinced, and I'm open to having a conversation as we engage in. I just, if it helps us maintain a healthy bond rating, if it helps us maintain a healthy reserve in the context of budgets getting bigger, projects getting more expensive, how do we find that right balance? And then the last comment that will make is regarding the study coming out. It sounds like we're all going to get a copy of it. I know that not everybody on the board is part of Budget Personnel Committee, but I would encourage board members to provide feedback to the Budget Personnel Committee so that we can consider that in that discussion before things move much forward. If we end up moving forward tonight, that way it just allows us to have a more healthy conversation in the BPC. That was a lot. So any thoughts you have, I'm open to.
We'll certainly address the comments that you said, and we've reported them. But I do want to reiterate that April 27th, the entire board will hopefully accept the study and has the option of going, no, we're not going to accept this Prop 218, or yes, we are, whatever we come up with.
I just think the nice thing about the BPC meeting is that it gets comments before perhaps we go to print. And if there's some jarring, glaring concern there, that maybe we could rethink the strategy before it does get to the board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, current rate's exactly $54, right?
Yes.
So an 8% increase is proposed would take us to $58.32.
Right.
9% increase would take us to $58.86. Hardly difference from the perspective of ratepayers. And if that buys off last 2 years at 9%, no, fellow directors find that more palatable than the current proposal.
So if I may, so those are the specific percentages as it relates to the residential rates. And I said the same thing, 5832. If you look at the presentation, it was not 5832, a little less than that. And that is the reason. The reason for that is the revenue requirements and the split between our residential customers versus our commercial customers. So that's part of the work that Wildan has to do. So it's going to be a little different when you finally look at what the rates are in terms of those percentages. But overall, it's an 8%. Now, in reference to I think what you're saying, Tom, is a 98877.
Something along those lines.
So I'm fine for that. I'm more inclined to say I would like to have some direction from the board so we can move forward with the understanding you need to see the report and you have a final vote April 27th. Like I said, all that's going to do is I think the cash reserves will be fine. Our total cash on hand will drop a little bit, but it'll still be above the 365. Once again, I'm sure Chris is, if he had hair, is pulling it out because I'm saying these things, but ballpark, that's where we'd be. That's a fine option. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't necessarily meet probably all the little goals, but globally, that's fine.
So the question is, does the board want to rip a little Band-Aid off immediately to get some of the down the line? Want to keep it so it's up.
I mean, from my perspective, I think that's something that we need to address once we see the rate study. I mean,
I don't think we can though. I think because the vote that we're making today is going to be what goes to print.
right, but then you're still going to vote on the 24th. We're still going to come back and say, yes, this is what we want.
But you're actually going to have all the rates. You're going to have the Prop 218 notice, all of that information. At this point, we just gave you a sampling of what the rates are for a handful of the rate categories and not mortuary or not nightclub. Yes, please.
I think what you're hearing, we hear your issues, you need to hear ours.
Yes.
And figure it out, and if somebody needs and if somebody needs to accelerate their timeline, because, I mean, I think Tom's got an interesting idea. There's no question, and I think part of the answer, the magnitude of the capital projects we have is because, you know, included within, you know, our rates may be lower, but, you know, Salinas is in that mix. And so the capital projects involved in NW1 is certainly going to be different than Greenfield isolated or, you know, or Gonzales isolated. So there's no question, these are the types of capital costs we're looking at. And, you know, I walked back into office like, oops, Salinas forgot to put an escalator on. The last time they did the sewage thing, and the bond folks we had to worry about would they call for the question. So I think the work you've done is terrific, but I, you know, from my perspective, what I would, you know, depending upon the timing, I mean, because I'm confident of the work that's been done, but I just think as a matter of principle, we're going to owe it to our residents that we've looked at this, and people still may not like it. But if, for instance, if you're meeting on the 10th, why can't we look at it on the 9th? Like, you know, something like that, and either come to the meeting or I mean, you might have a very interesting subcommittee meeting, you know, which, you know, I don't like lively subcommittee meetings, but they happen. But certainly we can send our play in from the sideline, you know, this looks good, and then you're gonna have, you know, because you're gambling on a printing cost, and you're asking us to gamble on, we haven't seen the study. And I'm gonna guess that's bigger than printing costs in terms of gambles. If you've got direct accountability to our constituents. So I just, one way or another, I think we need to see the information a little earlier so we can help the budget committee do their thing, and then, you know, assuming it's, and again, I'm just gonna be one vote. I mean, so just, these are my thoughts, but I think Salinas would be ready to go one way or the other on the 27th if we can see that budget or the study.
Could I ask if, I don't know how this works in regards to the timeline, but could the board give direction to the budget personnel committee to make the decision in context of having the study? And that way it gives a little bit more time to have kind of a more thoughtful decision before going to print. Is that something, I'm looking at both Paul and Jim from a administrative perspective, but also a legal perspective. Is that something that works?
And I think the board could gain authority. I mean, just like you delegate to the general manager, you delegate to the budget and personnel committee to make a determination relative to the 7 months or the 2 teams.
Okay.
That's what you're asking to do.
Yeah, that's it.
At an upper rate, you're not approving it, allowing all of his staff to publish a notice with that upper rate in it, and then you come out to the rate hearing, and then actually set what the rate will be. Meaning less, it just be more. It wouldn't address direct remorse situation if you did this, because you would set the 2027 at 8%, obviously you can't move it up to 9. Oh. Hey.
Can I throw another option?
Please.
If we push Wildan and we can get the study by 8th or 9th, could we have an extraordinarily short special board meeting? Yeah, because I blew through the 8:30, I was thinking.
Did we do?
Well, a subset can. We still need to have a quorum here, correct? Oh. Okay, so I'm just looking at our schedule versus when something would come out. If we can push it a little bit and get it the 8th or the 9th, could we have a special board meeting during lunch on I don't know, I'm gonna make this up, on the 13th or 14th? I know we start getting into all of your respective meetings. We'll save those sandwiches that we just got you. Put them in
That's
the
a hard
fridge.
no.
And then have a single item of moving this thing forward.
Okay.
That I'm just trying to address. Oh, I know you can't do the Tuesday, Supervisor Church.
Why don't we just keep the 10th?
I was trying to give more time for you to review the report.
I think it's.
Would you say originally the 14th?
I said the 13th.
What time, were we talking about evening or day, or what are we talking about?
So they'll get it to us. So, I'm sorry.
The time, what kind of time are we talking about?
If we did it on the 13th, could we do noon? Could we buy you lunch? We would cancel the BPC and we would just have a special board meeting on this single item on the 13th.
There's a good chance I'll be on a plane. I might be able to do an evening meeting on the 13th once I get to my destination, assuming that.
Evening's fine with me. I'm not sure who else has Monday evening meetings. This is the issue with 10 of you.
Why don't we just keep the 10th? And because you said you could get it to, I thought Wilden said that they could get it to us by Friday.
No, they're getting it to us to review Friday. Then it goes back to them and they were planning on getting it back like the 9th or 10th. That's why I was just trying to give some time for people to digest it.
And those are worst case estimates. It's likely that we'll have the report, prior to this Friday, and it's likely that, staff will have it turned back around to us, and barring any massive changes or something major, we'll have it finalized, earlier than the 10th. Those are sort of the worst case estimates.
And we were actually talking about moving the BPC to the 9th, just so you know.
Okay, let's go to public comment. Let's do that.
Oh, that's a good one.
Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Folks on Zoom, use the raise hand function. Not seeing any takers. All right, bring it back to the board. So I think I'll just try to make a motion that we get a special board meeting scheduled and figure it out. Do we need a motion for that? Can we just give like general direction? Is everybody good with that? Anybody have any issues? We'll continue the item without a vote. All right. You're good?
Yeah, I just want to confirm one thing that Rachel just brought up. We are not changing the rate structure at all. So I know the comments were brought up about vacant rate, but we weren't going to touch any of that this time. So you all know. I understand there's thoughts though.
There's thoughts and feelings, but I think we can get past them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we good? We're good. Thank you. All right. With that, we'll move on to item 11A. Report from Director Smith on his attendance at the annual Water Reuse Symposium in Los Angeles. It's attached in the agenda packet. It's a report. Anybody have any questions? All right, we'll take it out to the public. Anybody in the public wish to make public comments on this item? All right, seeing none, bring it back to the board. No last minute comments. All right, move on to 12 staff reports. I'm just going to ask if we can keep it super, super brief. If it's important to share, then let's say it, but otherwise let's defer to our special meeting.
which you're gonna want to get done real quick. No staff reports.
Staff report.
No staff reports.
Wow, look at that. Okay, 13 board member comments. Seeing none. 15. Oh no, we did 15. 16. Nope, we did 16. 17. Adjournment. Thank you, everybody.
Good job.
Oh my gosh.